When I first started working on the elevator, I had detailed concept art as base for my work. This is both a blessing and a curse. Concept art saves a lot of time for us artists, as we just have to copy what we see in the picture, but it also takes away some fun parts of our work, as we don't have to design anything ourselves. In this case, the concept art was very detailed and there wasn't much to change. However, I noticed that the roof part on the concept was dark and dull, so that's where I could add details of my own. I added the patterns to fill out the empty space. I wanted them to fit with the eastern feel of the elevator and took inspiration from Arabic windows. In the end, it's not a very big addition, but it adds to the overall impression of the elevator as something exotic that doesn't really fit in with the blue-grey stones of Brandenburg.
This map was one of the most fun to make because of the rooms have more objects than we usually add in the levels. I think the first two rooms was pretty good, just because of this. But we can't add this many objects in every room in the game, because that would, first of all, be very demanding on your PC's performance, and a lot of our players doesn't have gaming rigs. Secondly, it wouldn't make sense if every room or corridor was a storage. We also try very hard to vary the levels and rooms as much as we can do. This level was also the first time in the game the player had any contact with the outside. So for this part I had to make a couple of different wall pieces, a pine tree and a breakable version of the window. And I can talk a little bit more about the breakable window here. When creating breakable objects like this, we have to first of all break the model by splitting parts up and creating pieces. Like on this window, it has a lot of wood parts that are loose after it breaks. Those parts are remodeled into broken versions, and in the broken version of the window, they're actually hanging in the air at the same place they were when the window was whole. After modeling those and exporting the model into collada format, which our engine handles, I use our in-house model editor to set each wood part up with a body for collision, and I also add weight for it to behave realistically. I also add material type, in this case wood, and that is so that wood sound is played when a piece hits something. You can also set up more advanced stuff like how it will behave in water, how fast it can travel, and how fast the speed will decay, but also a lot of other settings as well. But when that broken version is done, I also set up a special entity of the original window where I set it to break at a certain force, and when that happens another entity will load and this one will disappear. And in this case we load the broken version of the window. We also set it up so a particle system with glass shards is going to be played as well as a break sound. And as soon as you break that window, and all that is happening, and since you probably threw something at the window, the force of that object will make the wood pieces fly, not fall straight to the ground as they would otherwise. That is pretty much how we do it with most breakable entities. But of course, creating a particle system and sounds for this is needed too. And in this level you can also see a lot of props that I made earlier, before we started making maps. This is objects like shelves, tables, chairs, paintings, etc. But of course I didn't make all the objects in this level.
Let's see what you have to offer. What a mess. I should have sharpened the saw, but I can sense it. It's definitely there.
The decision to have the player go outside in this map started out as a quick and dirty idea for some sort of puzzle. However, it turned out very nicely, and to see the trees really gives a feeling of being in a castle and not just on sunset. The first idea was not even to have the player break the window and just have it open directly instead. But when we added it, we felt it gave a really nice feel and reward for finishing the puzzle. In retrospect, we should have had more moments when the player ventures outside, and it gives this feel of being a part of a larger world.
journal is gone. What would they want with my journal? Someone's coming!
In this room, everything is connected to destruction and home. This was Daniel's home as Alexander's guest, and the diary entries are about Daniel being home in London and things falling apart. These sort of connections are not something that we want the player to get. Rather, it should end up in the subconscious and work toward building the mood. Also worth noting is this focus, as explained in the commentary of Wine Cellar, where I want the player's attention on a certain aspect. We hope this makes the story clearer. The idea is to slowly build it up, one part at a time, giving the player time to digest and think about it.
Daniel is a pretty complicated character to write for, as we didn't want the player to feel that they were losing control by having feelings imposed on them. After the amnesia kicks in, everything which is Daniel is essentially gone. The player is the new Daniel, and he should be able to act the way he pleases, and even reject his own background as he discovers it. That is why everything concerning Daniel is flashbacks. Even the diary entries are read as what is being told is happening right now. That is, it is the old Daniel telling the story, and not the player reading it.
July 1839. I received a letter today from the Algerian governor's office disclosing the fate of Herbert's expedition. About a week after my departure, Abdullah, one of the men traveling with us, returned from the desert. He was badly injured, as if maimed by a lion. The man rambled deliriously about the expedition being attacked by something horrible. The French quickly dispatched a search party to look for the expedition. After searching for days, they found the camp abandoned without any trace of Herbert or his men. Tomorrow, I'll retrieve the things they recovered from Herbert's tent at the customs house. I don't know what to make of it, but I'm worried for him.
When we create props, we usually have concept pictures or reference images to look at when modeling the object, just to make sure it stays within the art style that we are going for. When creating a chair, a table, or a bookcase, just to name a few, we usually have to plan the measurements before we get them into the game, because having something in the game that isn't the right size can break the immersion. But sometimes you have to cheat that and test it out, because the camera perspective can really trick you. I have the perfect example of the camera tricking you sometimes. Take out the lantern in-game and look at the wall or an object in the same height as the lantern and try guessing how big the lantern will be next to that object. Then walk up as close as you can to that object and compare. If you got a good example out of this, you see that the hand and lantern is in fact very small, but it feels right when it's close to the camera. But we don't want to go on gut feeling on the measurements of every object. That could really get out of hand quickly, and a lot of things could feel out of place. So it's basically a matter of changing the scale if it feels weird. When modeling the prop, we try to make it as close as the reference images as we can, or if you got a sketch, that is. It's often a quite simple process that usually doesn't take that much time, but it completely depends on what it is and if the sketch we have are detailed. Before giving the model a texture and working on that, we need to create a UV map for it. A UV map can best be described as an image with painted and edited details to it that is wrapped around the object. So the texture for a cardboard box, for example, would look like a box that you have unfolded onto the ground. After the UV map is created, we start to work on the texture. And here, we usually start with adding untouched materials like wood or metal, and these are from free photos found on the internet. We also paint in dirt in corners, highlights on the edges to enhance them. We can also bake and add an ambient occlusion map to the texture, which is basically a process where the computer calculates where the texture should be dark and where it should be light. We often generate a normal map based on certain details in the texture. A normal map uses light to add bumps or dents without using more polygons on the object. For specular maps, we use the red channel for the intensity level of the map and the green channel to determine the power of it. After all the textures are done, we export them to collada format and import them to our editors. There, we set material values, create bodies for collision, and stuff like that.
If you listen to the music tracks more carefully, you may find that characters have their own musical themes, which can usually be heard when you read papers during the game. These themes appear in many variations, so it's not always so easy to recognize them immediately. And in the end of the game, some of these themes will go quite insane. Oh, and that's Daniel's theme, which you can hear in the game's menu screen. Let me play it to you with piano. If you listen to the music tracks more carefully. If you listen to the music tracks.
Daniel?
What?
Still having nightmares, I see.
Yes, I can't shake them. They come every night.
We'll put a stop to them. You'll see.
July 1839. Today I picked up Herbert's things at the customs house. I dug through the trove of documents he had carried and found a log detailing the expedition. The nature of this text ranged from quick notes to colourful accounts of transpired events. I skimmed the pages, trying to figure out what might have happened. May 17th, the day I was trapped inside the orb chamber, Herbert dryly states, "Recovered Daniel after 1 hour of entrapment." This confused me greatly. I was suffocating within minutes. How could I have lasted an hour? I continued reading the peculiar text. Herbert states his facts without judgment or passion, but suddenly I could read frustration into his text. He pushed his men to investigate the underground tomb, an effort which seems to have strained the minds of his men. Madness spread through the ranks, and Herbert had to take some extreme measures to continue. He finally visits the chamber himself, where he retrieves the orb to the surface. His account confuses me greatly. If he has the orb, what are those pieces in my drawing room? 4th of July, 1839. It's done! The orb is assembled. I was awakened by an exhausting nightmare. Shaking and sweating, I retired to the drawing room with a cup of tea. The relic pieces lay spread across the table as I'd left them, but somehow I knew how it was supposed to be. I fetched the tar, which I had prepared to fix the pieces together, and without fault I joined them, producing the orb I remembered so clearly. The tar proved unnecessary. It was pushed out from the joining pieces as they merged on their own, with no adhesive. The ancient stone relic now rests on my table. Its immaculate surface and perfect shape could have been molded by a factory. This is all too strange.